Hello, and today is the 10th of December, which is the day I do my fleet update, except it's actually the 11th of December and you're probably watching this on the 12th. No, I best get on with it really. You can have it today. In the lockup, as you can see, Alfie is here. Alfie, yes, the car, the lovely Rover 45 called Alfie. But why is it here? Well, I'll tell you, if you're listening, that is. I have made the difficult decision to take this car off the road during the winter. For all of the obvious reasons. And that is simply it. If you've watched much of my channel, you'll know just how much I like this car. And I don't want it getting covered in salt underneath. So, here is where it will stay. Unless somebody buys it, that is. At some point before it re-emerges as well, I shall be doing some paint scratch rectification on it. As you can see, it all looks very good anyway, but it could look better. And that's what I want. I want it to look as nice as possible. I still have lots of people asking to buy this car, but when they find out what the price is, they change their mind. Simple, really. It isn't priced to sell, because I don't really want to sell it. You know, you give me the money I want for it, then fair enough, but otherwise, no, I'll just keep it, regardless of how skint I am. If I can't actually make a stand for the value of these cars, then what good am I doing? What job am I actually doing? Not the correct one, that's for sure. The other main car of the channel, of course, is Nigel. I've seen quite a bit of Nigel recently, if you've been watching the channel, and if you haven't, then perhaps you won't have done. Well, I've featured Nigel quite a bit, and he's even been featured yet again on JM on Cars. I think it would be difficult to be a follower of Nigel and not see it quite often, because it is always here. But this one as well is going to go off the road during the winter. I'm not particularly worried about this car because it is solid. It is properly solid underneath. But to cut down on costs, that's one less set of tax I don't have to pay. And the other thing, of course, is this car only really works when it's absolutely lovely and clean. And that's impossible when the roads are like this, because it's covered in salt and nastiness everywhere and it's horrible and it just looks disgusting. I remember when I first saw a Golf or a Polo Harlequin or whichever one it was, my first thought was, in a few years that's going to look really stupid. Once you get rusty panels, once they look dirty, and although I refuse to call this a Harlequin, it's the same principle with this. The big news, of course, is Gladys. Gladys, the car that Boaty and I bought together, has become my car instead. For the joint venture called Mustard and Boaty Do Cars. But we had a little problem. Not with each other. It's just been a matter of logistics. He simply lives a bit too far away. So the whole thing's going to be slightly on hold over winter at least, because being in this freezing cold yard is horrible. And that's just for me, and I'm used to it. But for a man like Boaty, he's just not equipped for this kind of thing at all. So spring will probably be the time that something else happens with that. And in the meantime, we've come up with a little arrangement where this has become my car. And it's had lots of love stuck on it. Basically, paintwork rectification. The rectification, the removal of scratches and swirls and all things nasty and horrible and unsightly. The addition of the Nigel sticker. The removal of the football sticker in the rear. All of these things go towards making a rather unloved green car a rather loved green car that I drive now. And I will say, I'm rather enjoying it. Sticking with 400s. There, Frank. Although this is actually a 200, it's a 214, as you may well know. If you know the yard reasonably well, then you'll notice that this car is in a different place to what it was the last time you saw it. Unless, of course, you just saw the last video. It was there where the 600 now is, which I shall talk about in a bit. But what's happening with this is, as you can see, look, a steel wheel on the front, look, a steel wheel on the back, and on the other side more steel wheels. This is at the request of a man called Adam, who wants to buy this car in the new year. As it is, he'll have it transported down to Kent, and he'll have other men try and fix it. Better men than me. Probably less interesting men than me, but better at doing things like this. I can change wheels. I can do all manner of things. But most of the time, I'm not as good as other men when it comes to fixing cars. Certainly the kind of men that can fix cars anyway. So, what of the Honda wheels that were on there? Well, they're not on there. They're in my lockup, where I've put them up for sale for some stupidly exuberant price. I don't know. I've got no idea what they're worth. I just had a look online, and they're rather difficult to find. And the ones that were on sale, people seem to be asking quite a bit of money for. So I did the same. Also, speaking of 400s, this is a 45, of course, which isn't the 400, but it is based on the 400. And you may know this car. You may know it as Rhiannon. Yep. That is another one of my little failures, you see. Not so much a failure, but just Boaty tells me that I'm a starter. I start things, but I don't really finish them. And I can relate to that, because that's exactly what I do. And this is kind of the same. I've done the head gasket on it, and then once I've done the head gasket, I started it up, and I soon found coolant leaking. Because what I didn't do was replace all of the thermostat housing while I did it, because I didn't think it needed doing. And it does. It really does, because it's coming out reasonably quickly as well. So, it's kind of on hold. You might wonder why it's on hold if it's just a thermostat housing, but it's still another item that I've got to buy and then spend quite a bit of time fitting when I could be doing something else. And I have been doing something else. Lots of people like this car, actually. Maybe they just like the name Rhiannon. It's a nice Welsh name, and I will get back to it quite soon. It's not going to cost a great deal for the thermostat housing anyway, but I always manage to find something else that's more important to buy. So speaking between the connection between the 400 and the 45, here is a ZS, except it's not a ZS, is it? It's a 45 made to look a bit like a ZS. It's a rather confused little car, really. It's very confused indeed. I'll tell you why it's confused. It's confused because it is actually a Rover 45 connoisseur, but it doesn't identify as one any longer. It looks like a ZS because it's got ZS bits on it. It's got ZS bits on the outside and ZS bits on the inside. And we know that. We know it as Nigel's deranged cousin. And now it's even got MG wheels on it as well, instead of those awful aftermarket things. Actually, I'm sure that was over a month ago when I put those on, so that's not really relevant to this video. But what is relevant is that this car isn't even mine now, but it still lives here. So that's why it's even more confused. It just wants to go to its new home in Birmingham and have a happy life there. It wants to live its best life, as people say, but at the moment it's just not happening. Maybe it will do soon. It's not being chucked out. It's welcome to stay. Look, there are those horrible wheels I was telling you about. And there is a bucket of frozen water. And here is a Rover 45. Do you know this car? Do you? Do you know it's not mine? Do you know it still belongs to... That's right. It's kind of a plug, that, isn't it? Craig's Rover 45. Does anybody want to buy it? £1,000. Without that number plate. £1,000 for a Rover 45 that was Craig's. Come and buy it. Come and buy it, take it away, and free up a bit of space for me. Lockup news. Well, I did have a bit of a tidy up in here, and you can't really tell because it's always going to be a bit of a tip. Unless I get all of these seats sold, then that's the case. There's no way. I'm tripping over stuff here. There is a space in the corner where some MGZT seats were, and they've gone off to Beards and Bangers. And there is my Peugeot bike, which has served me so well over the years. And I will get riding it again soon. Oh look, it's there, wrapped up in that box is an alloy wheel, which somebody's supposed to be buying, but they haven't done. My charger is in constant use because of the battery issue. That battery issue, of course, is batteries do suffer with the cold, and unless you keep them charged up, they start to fail you, and start to fail themselves, but it's not their fault. And another addition to the Lockup is this 1.8 K series engine, which may or may not find its way into Nigel at some point, but for the moment I don't know how long it'll stay there. It's weird actually, because you'd think an engine would be very much in the way, but it's not. It's no more in the way than the trolley jack, or probably less so than those wheels there, and it's not even that difficult to move. There may well be some very, very interesting projects, Nigel news, coming up in the new year. I'm going to keep it under my hat that I'm not wearing at the moment, but it will involve a man who last night was watching football and drinking lager. So I'll leave it at that. What next? Oh yes, the 800. The 800. What's this car called? I've forgotten now. Lady Charlotte of Southport, or Auntie Sophie as I call it. It's still sat here, haven't done nothing. I've dragged it out of the way ever so slightly, but that's about it. Because it doesn't start, it doesn't want to go. There's a problem with the communication between the ECU and the immobilizer, or the fuel pump. No, the fuel pump does work actually. Yeah, no, it's just a small problem. Maybe mice have been in there chewing up wiring, I'm not sure. But it is up for sale as a project. I've had lots and lots of response, just none of it that favourable. In bits, this car is worth a lot more than what I'm asking for it, but I don't particularly want to be taking it apart. I would prefer for it to go on to somebody else who can actually fix it, bung it back on the road. That's all I want, and it will remain here until I get offered that decent price for it, because if I let it go for the prices I've been offered, it's just going to end up scrapped anyway. Just like this sorrowful looking car called Amy Winehouse. This might be the first month that's gone by where no new items have come off of it. That's interesting, isn't it? And now the problem is that I can't even really get rid of it very easily, because transit face is going somewhere else, but again I'm not sure when. Transit face is going to be going off to live a new life in South Wales before too long, I should imagine. But of course this vehicle was responsible for getting rid of all of the carcasses once I'd finished with taking bits off for other cars. I've saved so many parts by doing this and stripping them down properly so that nothing's really going to waste. But I do need something like that to get rid of what's left. Otherwise, it means giving the shell to somebody else. And that is quite a big chunk of metal that's worth a substantial amount. I couldn't even sell something like Amy on as a bare shell because, well, it's rotten, isn't it? So that's exactly why it's met this particular destination in the first place. Poor old thing. I will dearly miss Transit Face. It's been a good old thing, even to the extent where I did its own little dedication video just a few days back, which many people liked. You never know, you may come back next month and it's still here, or it may have gone. At the moment, I don't know. Boaty's beloved Cheatham. Another confused car because he says it's neither a he or a she, but a them. He's basically taken the gender fluid notion just a step too far, because as I pointed out before, it is still actually an it. It can't be a he or a she, and therefore not a them. It's an it. It may be very nice it, and he's welcome to be very fond of this car, but that's boaty for you. I have promised to try and get this car sorted out. It does need a caliper on the back, which I have, but it's fitting it because it needs pads as well now. The old pads basically bonded themselves to the disc, which I've never seen before. It was quite interesting getting this thing around the yard with the back brake firmly stuck on, but it managed it. Underneath the tarp is a Rover 800. This here, look, it's I've been meaning to cover this up, but it keeps getting wet and I need to cover it up while it's dry. It's a rather lovely MGZT in the colour of Spectre, so its nickname is Spooky. And it's not mine, but it is welcome to stay here for a while. And I am certainly enjoying seeing all of these wonderful colours popping out all over the place, depending on which direction you are looking at it from. Most of the time on these update videos, everything I see has pretty much got no progress whatsoever. So when something does make some progress, I like to make a big deal of it. I'll look behind, there we can see Harry Seacombe. Harry Seacombe, the Rover 600 with a stolen catalytic converter that doesn't want to start because it needs a fuel pump. Well, it's there now, and it was over there. From the moment I acquired this car, I bunged it up in the corner over there thinking that'd be the best place for it, and it simply hasn't moved at all. So, to actually get it down from there to here without the assistance of another car or a truck, what does that tell you? Yeah, it tells you that the wheels roll freely and the brakes aren't seized, because that is simply all I've done, is let off the handbrake and roll it down here, and then with a decent battery use the starter motor to reverse it into that space. Yes, so still no progress, but it needed to be done. Actually, it didn't need to be done. I did it because I wanted to put the MGTF in its place, and so I could work on it there, because I kept getting it stuck. In fact, yeah, that was a problem. That was a real problem when I couldn't move the MGTF and it was in the way of other things. So I thought to put it somewhere where it's not in the way, so I can still move other things. More lack of progress with this one, knackered horse, the MGTF, which has now developed a bit of a split there, so there's nothing stopping leaves from falling onto the engine. But it's just not really doing anything anyway. Originally this car wouldn't start at all. There was no compression at all. And then I discovered that the head bolts hadn't been bolted down, so I did them up and then flicked the key and it started. That was great. And so I've been able to move it around nicely, if not very, very noisily indeed. But then last week it decided it didn't want to start again. Not because of compression. No, the compression's still there, it just doesn't want to start. And I've not got into investigating why this is. It's just another job to do. Finally, right down at the dark end of the yard. The end of the yard where nobody really has any business going to. Even me. We find the covered up SD1. Still covered up. Actually, it's not been here that long. It's been a couple of months since I parked it down here. And this seems to be the sensible place for what you might call the deadest of all cars, because you can't go anywhere that way, so you've just got that way. And all this space here, it would seem a bit pointless having a car at the end that actually starts and drives when I have got cars knocking about that don't want to do that. At some point during the new year, I will get this cover off and see if I can get that engine to turn over. I did have a brief attempt at that a couple of months back, and now I'm going to do it again once it's warmed up. For the moment, just like the 800, there just isn't any point even taking the cover off to show you what's there. Princess Diana's not living in there or anything, so we don't need to be investigating that. So I think this is probably the first month where no cars have come and gone. It's all exactly the same. The only thing that isn't here that was here before, unfortunately, is my trolley, Mr. Mitch. One day last week I was using it, and then suddenly it wasn't there. And that was during the daytime. I was using it to move wheels around, and later on the trolley wasn't even here. With the amount of people that come in and out of the yard and leave the gate open, it's not entirely surprising. It's always a bit of a concern, that. So yeah, bye bye Mr. Mitch. very, very disappointed by that. I don't know who's taken it, whether it's one of the carpet fitters or just somebody who happened to be walking by, seeing it there, seeing the gate open, seeing nobody about. I know I've left the yard, but I can still talk about the progress in the yard, because there's another thing. Yard cat. Lovely yard cat. Not seen yard cat all month. I've seen a couple of other cats, but actual yard cat, no. Also, yard squirrels. Yeah, more than one squirrel. In fact, 3. I don't know if it's a family of squirrels or not. I mean, it's very difficult to tell because they all look the same to me. And maybe a bit like pigeons. When do you ever see a baby squirrel? I don't think I have. Anyway, until next month, bye-bye.